Nigeria to improve security. Of course, we expect also that the outcome of this conversation today will push for an upward review of that budget allocation to the agri sector, particularly towards ensuring that that sector achieves its primary role of providing sufficient and quality food for Nigerians. So again, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome. But just before we go on, permit me to quickly recognize our chief host for today, the President and Chairman of the Governing Council, Institute of Directors, Nigeria, Dr. Mrs. Jidenma, F.IoD. You're welcome, Madam President.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Of course, I'd also like to recognize our host for today in the person of the Chairman, Agric and Agro-Allied Committee, IoD Nigeria, Mrs. Folusho Olaniyan, OON, F.IoD.
Thank you very much, Olaide.
Welcome. And of course, members of the Governing Council, IoD Nigeria, and Executive Committee present, you're welcome this afternoon. And the DG himself, the CEO, IoD Nigeria, Mr. Dele Alimi, M.IoD, and members of the Agric and Agro-Allied Committee, fellows and members of the Institute, non-members of the Institute present here today, this afternoon. You're very welcome, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. So just very quickly, as we go on, we would like to proceed now to taking our opening remarks. And I would like to invite our host for today, and that's the chairman again, Agric and Agro-Allied Committee, IoD Nigeria, Mrs. Folusho Olaniyan, OON, F.IoD, for our opening remarks. Over to you, Madam Chairman.
Madam President of IoD, Dr. Jidenma, F.IoD, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, and all delegates who have signed up to join this webinar. You would see that in Nigeria, food security has been an issue. 17 million Nigerians were said to have suffered from food insecurity in 2022, according to FAO statistics. And this year, it's been forecasted that between June and August 2023, another 25.4 million Nigerians face the risk of food insecurity. And we've looked at the budget of the nation, and only 1.05% of Nigeria's budget has been put towards agriculture. And the Malabo Declaration of 2014 gave a benchmark of 10%. Looking at the crisis looming, the Institute wants this discourse to look at ways and means of supporting the government to increase the allocation to agriculture so that we can mitigate the consequences of food insecurity, which range from unrest, child mortality, undernourished children, underdeveloped children. Also, this could lead to disease management problems because with stress and malnourishment, it's difficult for people to recover from diseases. So there's so much we have to discuss and talk about. There's so much that the panelists that we have on today have to share with us so that we can come out with guidelines and a work paper for the Institute to support the government in increasing this budget and ensuring that all stakeholders are taken care of to mitigate the crisis we may have ahead. I welcome everybody here, and especially my president, Dr. Mrs. Jidenma, who will also address us. And I hope our discourse goes on well and we come out with fruitful results that would move our nation forward and save us from impending hunger, because a hungry man is an angry man. I thank you and I welcome you all to today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, for that. That indeed has set the tone for today's conversation. So without much ado, I would like to invite our chief host again, and that's the president and the chairman of Council IoD Nigeria, Dr. Jidenma, F.IoD, for a welcome address. You're welcome, Madam President. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Mrs. Olaide John. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here again this afternoon. And I thank you all for logging in to be with our committee, high-performing Agric and Agro-Allied committee. So it gives me great pleasure to use this opportunity to also not only welcome, but also express immense gratitude to our moderator and panelists. And please give me the indulgence to mention their names, as this is the only opportunity I have. I have Mrs. Folusho Olaniyan, OON, F.IoD, who is the chair of the Agric and Agro-Allied committee. And our panelists, we have Mrs. Aisha, Umar, managing director, Iproduce Africa, who I understand is logging in all the way from Saudi Arabia. We have Prince Dr. Olabode, Adetoyi, CEO, Value Ingredients, who is a former commissioner for Agric and Food Security, Ekiti State. Also, Mrs. Folashade Joseph, M.IoD, Managing Director, Nigerian Agricultural Insurance Corporation. We also have Mrs. Edobong, Akpabio, Executive Director, Greenport Impact Cluster Nigeria Limited, former Chairperson of LCCI Agric and Allied Group. And Mr. Akintude, President, AFET Nigeria. So we thank you all for accepting to be here today. And I also seize this opportunity to thank all the office holders and the members of the Governing Council who are here today, and the Executive Committee of the Institute of Directors Nigeria, fellows, captains of industries, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. So I'm very, very happy to note that the theme of today's workshop is Nigeria's agricultural sector allocation relative to the national budget. Of course, all of us know that Agric is #1 thing now on everybody's radar, because in Nigeria today, people spend up to 40% of their earnings on food. So food is very important, and food security is essential in everything that we do, because just like the chair said that a hungry man is an angry man. So, I mean, we cannot have any stability if we do not have food security. So this event is aimed at providing a platform for stakeholders in the agricultural sector to examine and address the issue of public funding for the sector in Nigeria, and discuss other critical issues affecting agriculture and agribusiness, and those inhibiting the sector's ability to provide sufficient and qualitative food for Nigerians. As you may be aware, the agricultural sector plays a major role in the Nigerian economy because it contributes over 30% of total employment, and 24%. It also contributes 24% to the gross domestic product of the country. So if we are conscious of this, we must make sure that our budgetary allocations reflect this. In the last decade or thereabout, the agric sector's highest allocation was in 2019, when the sum of 22.29 billion was allocated to agric, and that was just 3.61% of the national budget. So now, this year, the allocation is 228.43 billion. And this is a paltry sum of 1.1%. So So you can see that it falls below expectations when compared with the agricultural allocations in the developed. And we are not just comparing with developed countries, even in the frontier economies all over the world. And even emerging economies in Africa, such as Zambia and Burundi. So compared to best practices as stipulated in the 2003 Maputo Declaration and the 2010 Abuja Declaration, the allocation, which is the suggestion or recommendation, which is 10% of budget, is what we should actually aim at. And so this 1.1% is totally unacceptable. To attain the goal of food sufficiency and sustained growth in Nigeria, there's need to address this challenge by advocating an upward review of the sector's budget allocation across all levels. I mean, state, federal, and so on. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss this thing about budget allocation and all that, we should not forget also related factors such as peace. Without peace, I mean, we cannot do anything. Peace is required for planning and optimal production. The farmers have to be able to plan, sow, and reap as required. So we have lined up very knowledgeable people to share this and bring various perspectives. These are people on ground with information and so on. So I will not take much of your time. I would just like to conclude by thanking them for accepting. And on behalf of the Institute, I thank also I must acknowledge the untiring efforts of Mrs. Folusho Olaniyan, OON, F.IoD, and also that of the members of the Agric Committee. This committee has been very, very active and dynamic. And I pray that we'll be strong advocates and that we from IoD Nigeria will be able to make positive impact to the planning and the execution of policies in the agri sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam President. In fact, those were really apt insight that you have just shared with us. And I believe that we've got very, very erudite panelists to take this discussion forward. So very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you our erudite panelists who are seasoned professionals and of course, industry players also in the agricultural sector. They will be doing justice to the topic at discourse, as we have rightly heard. And we believe that at the end of this session, this webinar today, we should come up with a valuable report, obviously, that would advocate for the upward review of allocation to the agri sector across all strata of government. So not just the federal, but across all strata. So in no particular order, I would like to introduce to us the CEO Iproduce Africa, Mrs. Aisha Umar. Just a brief profile of her. Umar is a legal practitioner and notary public. She was called to the Nigerian bar in 1988 and has acquired vast experience in the public, private sector, and academia. Over the past 33 years, she has, amongst other things, provided legal and technical advice to federal and state governments on various projects in the agriculture, education, transportation, petroleum, and water sectors. And of course, some of these projects have also been funded by the international development agencies, including DFID and the World Bank. She's currently a doctorate student at the University of West Scotland, Center for African Research and Enterprise and Economic Development. Again, she's also worked in the State House, Abuja in 2011 as a senior special assistant to the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And in that capacity, she rendered policy advice and technical support to the government on matters relating to social and political development. Coupled with her law practice in diverse areas and doctoral research, she also manages other roles, including agribusiness consultancy and social enterprise. And of course, she's the CEO of Iproduce Africa, a startup agribusiness company promoting trade and value addition of agricultural products sourced from communities in Northeast Nigeria. So you're welcome, Mrs. Umar.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Right, so going on, I would just quickly like to also introduce the Chairperson, Agriculture and Agro-Allied Committee, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mrs. Edobong Akpabio. Mrs. Akpabio is an agro-entrepreneur and business consultant with a passion for supporting entrepreneurs to grow their business successfully. She's the co-founder and director of Vision Age Agrotech Farms Limited and Organic Green Animalia Farms. Again, both of them are actually family businesses that provide unique food products to the public, internship and experiential agro training, and capacity building for existing and potential agro entrepreneurs in Nigeria. She currently serves as the Executive Director, Administration and Business Strategy Implementation for Greenport Impact Cluster Nigeria Limited. Again, she has served and still serves on various capacities, but of course, because of time, I won't be able to go through all of that. But just to mention a few, that she has occupied various positions as well, including sector leader, agribusiness sector group, NECA Network of Entrepreneur Women, Publicity Secretary, Lagos State Chapter, Institute of Agribusiness Management of Nigeria. Again, she's also the chairperson, as I rightly mentioned, of the Agriculture and Agro-Allied Group, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And she's a fellow of the Institute of Agribusiness Management of Nigeria. You're very welcome this afternoon, Mrs. Akpabio.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Going on, I'll still like to introduce to you the CEO of Value Ingredients and of course, the former Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture and Food Security, Ekiti State, Prince Dr. Olabode Adetoyi. Dr. Adetoyi is actually an international agribusiness icon, business development expert, and industrialist par excellence. He is the founder of iNutrient International Limited, Value Ingredients Limited, and Premier Nutrition Products Limited, Lagos, Nigeria. He is the immediate past Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture and Food Security in Ekiti State. And during his tenure under His Excellency, Dr. John Kayode Fayemi, agriculture was given prominence and the state was able to raise a bar in the agricultural sector as one of the pillars of that government's agenda. Again, we can record his success by bringing more than viable 20 investors into Ekiti who ventured into agro-allied companies and brought a combined value of investment of more than $350 million. Of course, there are others, some of which include the Ikun Dairy Farms by Promasidos, Agbeyewa Farms from the USA. And even several successes have been recorded in the area of arable crops, as there have also been increased production of rice with the launching of Ekiti State Rice Pyramid, cassava value chain from Agbeyewa Farms Limited, and several others. His passion is to see Ekiti develop in terms of industries, agriculture, knowledge economy, youth and women development, infrastructure, and human capital. So ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Prince Dr. Adetoyi. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Madam Moderator.
You're welcome. And still introducing the President, Afex Nigeria, Mr. Akinyinka Akintunde. Mr. Akintunde is the President of Afex Nigeria, a unique role where he provides in-country oversight and leadership of Afex business entities to help accelerate operational excellence, growth, and go-to-market transformation through strategic platforms and partnership. He is an accomplished executive with global business building experience with Afex operations across Africa. And in his role, he's actually responsible for driving innovation and leading performance across the financial and capital market system. Of course, before Mr. Akintunde took up his current role, he was the Chief Operating Officer at Afex, a position he significantly engineered Afex strategic direction, employee roadmap, technology, and development efforts. And he also spearheaded the firm's endeavor to leverage technology to transform the commodities exchange ecosystem in Nigeria while using innovative human-centered approaches in developing products that are set to transform the investing landscape of the continent. Of course, it specializes in strategy, finance, capital markets, product development, and business technology. So you're welcome, Mr. Akitude, this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Olajide. Great to be here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this panel. Thank you.
You're welcome. And finally, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, introducing the Managing Director, Nigerian Agricultural Insurance Corporation, Mrs. Folashade Joseph, M.IoD. Of course, who is ably represented this afternoon by the AGM Planning, Research and Development, Mr. Jerome Olowoyeye. Of course, Mrs. Folashade Joseph is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Agricultural Insurance Corporation. She is a seasoned administrator and a technocrat with experience in finance, administration, insurance, and ICT, spanning over 2 decades in both public and private sectors of the Nigerian economy. She is a fellow of many prestigious institutes and professional associations, and also a member of our great institute, the Nigeria Institute of Directors. Mrs. Folashade Joseph was first appointed as the Managing Director, CEO of Nigerian Agricultural Insurance Corporation in April 2017. And for the past 4 years, she has changed the narrative in the corporation. Part of her drive really was for the corporation excellence, including introduction of board and management retreats, management business review meetings, performance reward system, and intensive human capital development, all of which she has combined to drive the corporation's business to the current enviable level it enjoys. Mrs. Joseph's superlative performance in the position has, not surprisingly, earned her a reappointment for another term of 4 years in office. So you're welcome again, Mrs. Folashade Joseph, of course, ably represented by the AGM Planning, Research and Development, Mr. Jerome Olowoyeye. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Moderator. I'm happy to be here on behalf of my MD.
Awesome. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to go straight into the discourse for today. And as we rightly heard from the remark from the Madam Chairman and of course, Madam President, we are at a critical time where about 25 million Nigerians are at risk of food insecurity, particularly during June and August 2023. Again, this is not due to reasons such as continued conflicts, climate change, soaring food prices, inflation, among other factors. And that's actually according to the United Nations. But in all of this, the Nigerian government in its 2023 approved budget has allocated 228.4 billion out of a total approved budget of 21.83 trillion to the agricultural sector. Again, this represents a major 1.05% of its budget, despite the administration claiming that it's working towards attaining food security. How ironic. Again, we looked at a further breakdown of that budget, and it reveals that the sum of 136.68 billion was allocated to capital expenditure, which is equivalent of about 59.84% of the budget, while the recurrent expenditure got about 85.42 billion, which is about 37.37%. While we commend the government in terms of the sharing ratio that we have a more allocated to the capital expenditure, it is important to also note that those capital line items are a repetition of line items in previous budgets. Again, this allocation, I would say, represents a further decrease to the percentage allocated in 2022, and may in fact set our country back in its journey of achieving food security. And let me also let you know that this trend is not now, it's been over the years, and it's a far cry from the 10% benchmark recommended at the Olabode Declaration on Accelerated Agricultural Growth and Transformation for Shared Prosperity and Improved Livelihood. When we had a review, of what we've allocated in the last 10 years, we found out that the government has actually allocated less than 2% over the last 10 years, except in 2018 and 2019, where the allocation exceeded 2%. Even at the subnational level, budgetary allocation to the agricultural intervention, again, remains grossly inadequate. But I must also let you know, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that Nigeria in the 2022 Global Food Security Index, we ranked 107 out of 113 nations, deteriorating from a 100 position in 2021. And I'm sure you would agree with me that this development is quite worrisome. And I know we can also link that to increasing food crisis and security across the country, coupled with issues in the global food supply. But let me not do the talking because my job here is only as a moderator. I've got erudite panelists to do justice to this topic. So against this background, I would like each of my panelists, to share their own perspective of what needs to be done for governments across all strata to understand the importance of allocating at least 10% of their budgetary allocation to the agricultural sector, considering that, again, the sector is the highest contributor to the national GDP and also in terms of employment. So I'd like to start with Mrs. Aisha Umar. So what's your own perspective? So over to you, Mrs. Umar.
Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this very important seminar or program. So like you said earlier, I am a lawyer, and I'm sure many would be wondering, what's a lawyer got to do with agriculture? So my first, my initial, let's say, engagement or knowledge or exposure to the agri sector was around 2017, when I was engaged as a lawyer by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources to come up with a legal framework for the reform of the sector. Now, that legal framework, the brief that I was given then, was essentially to create some agencies, such as the National Food Reserve Agency, which was a department of the ministry. They wanted the Food Reserve Agency, and we drafted a bill. It was sent to the Federal Executive Council, and in actual fact, it was passed by the National Assembly, sent to the presidency, but it wasn't assented to. Another bill that I was asked to draft was the Seeds Council. The National Seeds Council used to be a department, but they wanted that as well to become an agency, and that was done. It was passed by the National Assembly, and President Goodluck assented to it. There was also the National Quarantine Agency, which was another bill which I was responsible for drafting. Again, it was sent to the National Assembly, and that has come to existence now. So basically, some of the agencies were created and some were not assented to. There was also the hydrological water services. There was the Nigerian Water Management Agency, which has now become Ministry of Water Resources. So some of the agencies that we created remained with the ministry. And as you know, at that time, Ministry of Water Resources and Ministry of Agric, there was a time when they merged them, but now they're separate. Anyway, that's all history. So I have a very, very in-depth understanding of how the Ministry of Agriculture functions. I understand the structure. I also understand a bit about the issues that are facing the ministry as a whole and their ability to discharge their functions. Now, the first thing I want to say is that even though the budget that we see of the ministry may be under the 10%, the ministry has tons of agencies, and each of those agencies also has their own separate budget. So if you're going to look at the entire budget of the sector, not the ministry, then you'll find that actually it's quite substantial. Now, I think in order to do that, it would be useful to even know how many parastatals there are and which ones, and then you'll understand that each and every one of them has their own budget, which if you add everything up, comes to quite a lot. So the Ministry of Agriculture has 15 research institutes, and each of those institutes has their own budget. It also has 16 federal colleges of forestry. There's also 17 departments within the ministry. There's also some universities of agriculture. So aside from these institutes, which are all basically learning and research institutes, you also have 11 parastatals. And that is the National Quarantine Agency, the Bank of Agriculture, the Agriculture Rural Management Training Institute. There's also the Nigerian Agriculture Insurance Corporation, and I believe one of the guests is here, and I would love to hear about that issue of how the relationship between the ministry, especially vis-a-vis the budget. There's also the National Center for Agricultural Mechanization, Institute of Animal Sciences, and also Institute of Soil Sciences. There's a Veterinary Council of Nigeria and Agricultural Land Development Authority, which is NALDA. There's Research Council of Nigeria. So essentially, I know that they're just all these institutes, of course, Bank of Agric, all trying to produce their own little, but I think they're all working in silos. I think there's a lot of territorial action going on where everybody wants to keep their own rather than work as one. And I don't know the extent to which the minister even has control of how much they spend, because I know agencies and ministries typically, they're always having friction, because the head of the agency is usually in charge of discharging, doing the implementation, and the ministry is only meant to be developing policy. Now, what you tend to have is that the ministries want to actually develop programs. And as you know, ministry is centralized. And when they try to develop programs, what happens is very difficult for it to trickle down to the grassroots, to the farmers, the producers, who are really the ones that need that support. To be honest, most of the funding ends up just being frittered away, having meetings, training in the federal, and all sorts of them talking to each other, and very little, let's say maybe, I don't know the percentage, but I know that it would say 50% goes to the farmers, would be very lucky. So that's one major issue, is that they take up so much in running their day-to-day that they leave very little for capital. So these are the kind of issues. I don't want to say too much, but I think we need to look at the entire sector and then now talk about how they can change it. But that's just my own view of, or my understanding of what is going on before we even get to the numbers. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much, Mrs. Umar. All right. So let me invite our Mrs. Akpabio. So what's your own perspective? Mrs. Akpabio.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olaide. It's amazing because we are the supposed recipients of some of the initiatives from the ministry. And while we may have a somewhat knowledge about what Mrs. Umar has just explained, truth is that it really doesn't gel very much with us, because end of the day, the truth is what the Bureau of Statistics will provide, and that is that the government is not providing enough and meeting the obligations that it has signed on, especially the 10% provision, the Malabo Declaration. So for us, it's more or less tragic that so much is being spent on a recurrent expenditure from that little budget, and then there is absolutely no basis for an expectation of an improvement in the sector nationwide. For me, the issues that are very clear from my experience working with public institutions in the sector is that there is no synergy. There is no synergy among the departments, the parastatals, the agencies that are under the ministry, Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, and that's at the federal level. At coordination between the federal ministry and the states is almost non-existent. So we can't seem to find the common ground for us to have development per se in the sector. As long as we continue to see the sector as a charity, a social service, where farmers are regarded as people in the rural areas, farmers in the rural areas who are supposed to only produce for their subsistence needs, and just a little extra, for commercial purposes, we will not be able to develop the sector. There is no enabling environment. In short, there is no enabling environment. I can't seem to see it. And I've knocked my heads over the years on all those areas in the same ministry. I'm having to talk to 20 people in 20 different places, none of them
Hello, Mrs. Akpabio, I think we lost you there. Okay, so while we're waiting.
And yet I have a document that tells me that but that is the situation that I have.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Akpabio. I think we just had a glimpse, but thank you so much for that insight there. So I'll come now to Prince Dr. Adetoyi. You were the former Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture and Food Security, Ekiti State. So what's your own perspective?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and good afternoon to IOD President, of course, my boss there, Mrs. Olaniyan, and all the members, and of course, good afternoon to Nigeria. When I have the opportunity now to be both in the private sector and the public sector, at least in the field of agriculture, now I put in more than 27 years. And I agree with the first and the second speaker. My observation is that between the private and the public, the synergy is still less than this. The synergy is still less than the synergy is still less than 40%. So that is the challenge that we are having as number one, because the policy maker are there, which is a federal government. Then the state government, they are there. I agree with Madam, even as a commissioner for former commissioner for agriculture, a lot still needs to be done between the federal and the state. We're not even talking about whether they meet the 10% malabo or not. I have reviewed what the government has been doing at either state or federal level in the last couple of years, even more than 20 years. The budget is still very, very small compared to the value that we have in agriculture. And I say it, some of my friends that are in abroad, they will say, what are you still doing in Nigeria? You have opportunity to be in US, to be in UK, to be in Canada. Who are those who that will remain in Nigeria to solve the problem? So the problem, the challenges of agriculture is about funding. Apart from funding too, we have policy somersault. Number three, there is no, let me say, that enthusiasm, because agriculture has been relegated to maybe for those people who are in the rural area. And it's not that. I believe this Japa syndrome, traveling abroad, the problem will be solved if government, both in the federal level and the state, focus attention on agriculture because of the potential that is there. I do not expect agriculture to be contributing between 23 and less than 30% to the GDP. Agriculture in Nigeria today should be contributing 60%. The oil that we depend on should be contributing less than 5 to 10%. So we must focus attention on agriculture. In fact, we must exceed the Manabo declaration of 10% we are talking about. Agriculture budget to total budget, if it's still less than 20 to 25%, then I don't think we are there already, because there are challenges in the area of capital expenditure. Farmers are not having good road, access road. And even when they produce, more than 60% of their production are lost. There is no any concentration of a processing unit. These are the the infrastructure government need to focus attention on. So if you will ask me, budget, there must be, the new incoming government must declare it as a priority. There must be state of emergency in agriculture. It must be reviewed to 25% of the budget. If food crises are solved, which agriculture can provide, if there is food, if there is employment, currently now, agriculture still generates employment for more than 37% in the labor force. And of course, more than 80% of it are in the rural area. So government must focus attention to scale up the funding. Two, they must also participate in the public-private sector. I will give the example by the time I get to the case study of Ekiti State. Thank you once again.
Thank you so very much, my Honorable Commissioner, for that. So now let me come around to the President of AFEX, Mr. Akinyinka Akintunde. So a lot has been said, but what's your own perspective?
Thank you. And I think I couldn't have summarized it better than everybody else that has spoken earlier. But the approach I would like us to look at it is we can't run away from the fact that the government in Nigeria, as it is right now, is strained across all fronts, right? No matter how much we put it out there, the importance of agriculture. I mean, there's no way we can undermine the importance of the sector. We're talking about a sector that contributes over 25% of your GDP, that has so much potential that we're barely scratching 50% of its capacity. So there's no doubt that the agricultural sector is important. What we're now battling ourselves is why are we still putting a funding of below 2% of our budgets in this sector? And I'll try to look at it from priority of the government. Yes, it's very important, but is the government putting the appropriate priority on agriculture for it to attract the appropriate financing? There are a lot, the revenue at the government level is very low right now. We see a lot of conversations around increasing taxes, increasing revenue streams, high debt, borrowing from to fund the budget deficit, and a lot of issues that directly impacts the government capacity to fully effectively drive what we need to drive across all sectors. So on a high level, the government is largely leveraged, so much so that the priority that the agricultural ecosystem need is not given the appropriate attention. And I think that's where the new administration needs to start from. We need to also find out what are the other ways we could attract capital into the sector. And I'll give you an example. Yes, we talk about agriculture being a key driver of the economy. But if you look at the credit from commercial banks towards agriculture, it's less than 5% of all their credit lines, which is the same thing across all sectors. So even if the private sector cannot come into this place, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to come to mandate the government to stand by this declaration that we are calling on this to increase the activity or the financing of agricultural ecosystem. Now, the other part which I would like to look at it is what is the opportunity cost of this reduced funding? There are a lot of other areas in which the government could focus on, and we've alluded to the fact that majority of even the current budgetary allocation actually goes to personnel financing, which means that other areas that requires attention that are critical to the growth of the ecosystem is greatly suffering, such as much more investments in research and development that is required to increase the capacity of players in the ecosystem, investment in infrastructure that is required, like the honorable former, like Prince Adetoyi is mentioned earlier. He said the fact that most farming locations don't even have access road. If there's no access road to where we're getting the produce from, then it means that we're crippled more than we know. So the required investment in infrastructure is being crippled because we're not even putting the appropriate allocation in place. So I'll say, for the new government to be able to address this head on, I'll say, first of all, they need to put agriculture on a high priority list in terms of budgetary allocation, in terms of deliberations and co. Second, the government needs to be innovative in attracting the appropriate capital to finance. When you look at the macro and the high debt of the government and the reduced income across all revenue lines, then you see that it's going to be a very, very difficult case for you to make for increased allocation to the agricultural sector without thinking of innovative access of attractive finance that is required to drive activity in the ecosystem.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so very much for that. Really, a lot needs to be done because every sector is also canvassing for, their own funding of their sectors, right? So, but we need to be more innovative, to see how can we attract, finance to that sector. So without going for, I would like to invite Mr. Olabode, representing the MD of NIC, to tell us his own perspective, on this issue of adequate funding for the agricultural sector.
Thank you, Moderator, and good afternoon once again to everyone. My name is Jerome Olabode, and I'm representing Mrs. Folashade Joseph, the MD and CEO of Nigerian Agricultural Insurance Corporation. Much has been read about the MD, but nothing much has been said about NIC, the organization that she superintends. NIC was established in 1987. As an agency of government to protect Nigerian farmers against risk of natural disasters on the agricultural production. And the essence of administering the scheme, the National Agricultural Insurance Scheme, is to ensure that appropriate compensation is paid to farmers who are insured under the scheme after they have suffered some losses to their production, and that appropriate compensation is paid to them that will ensure that they go back to production. That is much about NIC. Before I go ahead again, I think I missed to tell everyone here that Mrs. Folashade Joseph sent her respects. She would have loved to be here. Personally, I'll be talking to you, but unfortunately, because of exigencies of duties, she couldn't make it. In contribution to the subject matter, it baffles me because mostly at the government does a lot. As we are talking about budgeting now, even National Agricultural Development Fund has been created. We have to look beyond just budgeting. We have said it time without number that the principle of the bane of Nigerian underdevelopment is throwing money at problems. The fundamental issues of the problems are never checked. We just throw money at them. When you throw money at problems, you are not solving that problems. Where we agree that the budgetary provisions for agricultural sector is very low, but what has been done to what is the utilization of what has been budgeted in the past? For instance, the federal government budgets for agriculture, the state government budget for agriculture, the local government budget for agriculture. And to make it worse is at the national level or at state level, we see what we call agricultural rice pyramids, yam pyramids. You don't need all these pyramids to show you are producing. All you need is the cost of these products at the market to show that you actually produce. You don't need to do pyramids. Pyramids are just political gimmicks of showing you are working while you actually not doing anything. You go to the market to show the prices, check the prices. If the prices are falling, it means you are producing. So I want to agree that budgeting, extra budget for agriculture is necessary. But first, it must be target budgeting, not just budgeting for budget purposes. Just target budgeting, goal-oriented budgeting. Target must be set and attached to those budgets. And at the end of that budget year, the targets must be measured, whether they have been realized or not. And if they are not realized, there is what we call logical framework. We check all the indices that should have ensured us to attain those targets. And if those targets have not been realized, are those indices in place? If they are not in place, we review our target and we set a new target. And then we ensure that we focus on ensuring that those indices work for us this time around. If they are not working, we change them. So it's not just throwing money or just increasing budget. Our government, we always know how to, as we just said, we always know how to increase budget on the same budget lines. But what has come out of it? Nothing. So let me round up by saying that first, our budgeting must be target-based oriented budgeting henceforth. And the goals to be achieved must be attached to those targets. And there must be adequate monitoring to ensure that you don't have to achieve that goal. If you have not achieved that goal, it is not a sin. It only helps you to reprioritize your goal setting and improve on it another time. Then number two is that I agree that there is no synergy among the parastatals. You will see that national NASA, national incentive-based risk sharing system for agricultural lending will be competing with NIC. There is no need for competing. NASA is not an underwriter. NIC is an underwriter. So what we are supposed to do is to synergize. Where can NASA help NIC? Where can NIC help NASA? And so many other sister organizations, so that our sole target is food security for Nigeria, not for NIC or for NASA. So we must synergize and ensure that the synergy works very well. And that is where the new government should come in to ensure and insist that synergy exists between all the organizations that are established to push the agricultural sector to the desired land. Let me stop for now. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so very much, Mr. Jerome Oloye. Thank you very much for that. So let me come back to Mrs. Aisha Umar. Taking a cue from what you said, and that's talking about, of course, the various agencies, the various ministries and parastatals, but them working in silos. And I'm sure you would agree that there's a need for strategic partnership across board. So from your perspective, even as we have identified the issue, what do we need to do to foster that strategic partnership across the various status as well? Mrs. Aisha Umar, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just trying to.
Awesome.
I think they've taken my I can't. My video just refused to come on. I'm trying to press it.
Anyway.
Okay. All right. Maybe the admin can help me.
Admin will check it.
Yes. Yeah, because it was. Oh, okay. Here we are.
Yes,
okay.
You're back
okay.
Now. Yes.
Thank you so much. You see, honestly, I've gone to so many workshops and programs for the last since 2017. And this problem keeps coming up and this discussion keeps taking place. We've talked and talked and talked, analyzed, and nothing has happened. Unfortunately, I have to say the political will to make that change. I don't think it's an issue of not knowing what to do. I think we all know the problems. We all know exactly the solution, but I'm sorry to say that there are vested interests who don't want the status quo to change. And those vested interests, I have to say, with all due respect, the civil servants. The civil servants are the ones that are benefiting from this budget system that we have. A lot of the monies in the budget, we have not even talked about the foreign money. You know, Nigeria is a member of many international food organizations. There's IFAD, there's the FAO, there's the World Bank has given so much money, and all this isn't even in the budget, as in the ones we see. So aside from these agencies that are all guzzling money, we also have this funding that we borrow. There's money, central bank intervention programs. You know that there's a wheat, anchor borrow on wheat. There's anchor borrow on rice. I think there's anchor borrow on now 2 or 3 other things, and they run into billions. So I think budget is not the problem. The problem is to have a minister that is able to control the civil servants and perhaps using technology. This is my own solution. We need a minister that can control the civil service, that has also no vested interest, who is also going to use technology to jumpstart us from where we are. We're still doing 70s style. This is 2023. We have refused to adopt modern practices, and it's very, very convenient to just continue as we are because they're vested interest, especially the civil servants. Ministers come and go. As soon as the minister comes, the civil servants will feed them with whatever they want to feed them. And because of the pressures that the ministers do, number one, ministers are usually not even agriculture. They don't have background. I don't even understand. That's another issue. We need experts. I know that Akin Additional did some work for Central Bank as a consultant. So he happened to know agriculture. But aside from him, very few of them are actually gotten agriculture backgrounds. So to even start their learning, before 2-3 years is when they start to learn, is they're out. Sometimes ministers are shuffled after 2 years anyway. So these are all the kind of issues. I'm sorry to say, I've seen this over and over, this discussion, but to now be able to really get value for the money. You know, I think the last speakers, Mr. Bode, you know, the money is there, we're not getting value for it because there are just a few thousand people that are years and years and years and years of just screaming off the system. So aside from the budget, we have to look at how it's utilized. That's my opinion. Then also the issue of private sector, quickly. Private sector have a very, very, very critical role. I have a startup company, it's an agribusiness company called Iproduce. Now, Iproduce is essentially an ecosystem of agribusiness entrepreneurs. And I started that because I felt that we needed a new generation of agribusinesses. And I'm also interested in value addition because aside from production, which is what the ministry is trying to do, there's also the issue of the value chain development. How do we get young people or new generation, let me say, to go into a value addition so that whatever these farmers are producing, we now add value before we go on so that we can capture some of that value. So that's one of the reasons why I set up Iproduce. The second thing that is really, really critical, right, to me is the issue of credit. Again, the conditions are so stringent. It's very, very difficult for farmers without collateral to be able to go. So that is why only retired generals or retired governors go into agriculture value addition. Why? Because they have also gotten enough money that they can invest. But an ordinary person that doesn't have money looted somewhere cannot even go into agribusiness because of the high capital costs. So, you know, these are kind of things that we need to address if we're serious. Unfortunately, I really don't think we're serious, but maybe one day it will happen, but I'm so disillusioned. Very, very sad. Yeah, this is it. And like I said, the borrowing is too much. Borrowing money is too much. We're not using that borrowed money. World Bank is giving us a lot. FAO is giving us a lot. IFAD is giving a lot, and it's in foreign exchange. And nobody knows about it, only the civil servants. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that. In fact, a lot has been said. First, again, it's not all about the money because as it were, from our perspective, it seems as though, yes, the budget is really not the issue, but what do we do with the budget? How is it implemented when the funds come in? And the tone is always set at the top. Who is the leadership of the ministry, you know, and what needs to change, you know, in terms of the process, the work process of the civil servant. Thank you so very much, Mrs. Umar, for that insights there. So let me come now to Dr. Adetoyi. Of course, you were the former Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture and Food Security in Ekiti State. And in fact, in one of the reports that just came out for the Southwestern region, we understand that Ekiti State recorded the highest performance as it achieved 76.1% of its budget, that's as at Q3 2022. But of course, it also allocated 55% to capital expenditure and 45% to recurrence. From your own perspective, in spite of all of this, we really can see that translating into the cost of input. We really can see that also looking at the prices of food prices in the market. We even in terms of infrastructure, we can't readily see that. So I think from your own perspective, what I would like to get from you, yes, we know that the budget is there, is being spent, but how do we measure the performance of that budget on the impact it has to the common man?
Thank you, Olaide, once again. And I want to thank my former governor, the present one, for bringing me out from the private sector to the public sector. I want to agree with Madam Umar. First thing that is very, very important, that ministry is a science-based. Agriculture is a science-based profession. And who is the leadership there? we explain so many things, because if a Minister of Agriculture that is a professional like Adedipe, with apology to other minister that has come to Federal Ministry of Agriculture, first of federal, then come to state, because it's very, very important. No matter the agencies, the MDAs under you, if you're an agric person, if one MDA is performing, you will know. And if a director or DG want to come and tell you story, you will know. So first thing first is to ensure that that Federal Ministry of Agric and maybe all of our state Ministry of Agric, there must be a professional touch there who knows his onion and know where it's coming from. And of course, he must have history, not just political. He must have history of development in the area of agriculture. With that, this synergy we are talking about, even the administration is just to make use of them. But what we are saying is that his attention will be focused on target, because I participated in some of the policies that was enacted during the additional era. So what are we talking about? Because this also was what we brought into Ekiti State. One, what is our policy on crop production? If we look at it generally, that agriculture is contributing 25% to the GDP or 30% to the GDP. The first target is to say we want Nigeria agriculture or a state government agricultural revenue to be contributing, let's say 50% of the entire revenue of a government. Then you cascade it to, okay, what are we looking at? On the crop side, we have a lot of production. What can we improve on using technology? The land, we should solve the problem of a land. Land tenure system is still a bane in this country. Let's say I want to cultivate 500 hectares of land, maybe for maize, especially in the southern part of the country. I will need nothing less than 700,000 to prepare the land for maize. How do I break even? Because we are talking about a high cost of food. How many tractors do we even have in the entire country? It's less than 11,000. And even some states, I don't think they even boast of maybe 5 tractors. Those are the issues. We need to look at the issues. Whoever that is at the end of affairs need to look at the issues. One, the policymaker, train and retrain to position their mind into the target that is set. So the new incoming government must set target. Setting target on crop production, where we have our core competencies. Look at the entire 6 geopolitical zone. Where do they have their comparative advantages? For example, maybe in the south or the southwest, for example, maybe they will take a cocoa and maybe yam and cassava, for example. Maybe in the eastern part, maybe they will take oil palm and maybe rice or soya. Maybe in the northern part, rice is very good, maize is very good, sesame seed is very good, sorghum is very good. We can declare state of emergency on all those ones and say, look, just like a federal government and some state government did for rice, we see the positive impact of that rice now. That was why I agree with my colleague, Jerome Olowoyeye. It's not enough for pyramid, as that one reduce in the country today. Rice, a bag of 50 kg rice should not be more than 10,000 naira. If we have 70 million hectares arable crops in the country. So what do we do? For example, in Ekiti State, for example, during Dr. Jonkayo Defayemi administration, and of course, the new administration now, because the governor there was our SAG, who is part of the system. And thank God for him now, he continued. One, address the issue of land. Government will acquire land. Then, of course, some compensation paid, depending on the capacity of the government. Compensation has to be paid, and maybe gradually agree with the community. Two, Ekiti State government, we try to prepare land to attract investors. So government should look at a public-private partnership, providing land for them, making it easier for them to have a certificate of occupancy. We are not talking about land speculators. So as soon as your certificate of occupancy is given, hit the ground running. The same thing was done in the area of livestock between Ekiti State government and a Promasido. Today, thanks to His Excellency Dr. John Kayode and His Excellency Biodun Abayomi Oyebanji, Ekiti State today has the finest that you can ever see of a dairy farm. I've never seen a dairy farm in Nigeria today that beat a dairy farm. And that is a partnership between state government and Promasido. Government does not have any business in government but to provide an enabling environment. What was done? Land clear for them, land provided for them. Then some of the equipment, multiple equipment that could not be run by government official passed to the company. I believe the federal government should do same. And of course, we also prioritize cocoa. We look at it that, oh, some of our cocoa, I went around the state with my team there. Because I say first thing is to the civil servant people, they are very knowledgeable. But you need to, very knowledgeable in the field. Of course, some of them, they like a treating file in the office, or at least encourage them to be on the field. When they're on the field, they'll begin to enjoy it. So, cocoa, oil palm, rice, cassava, we prioritize all those ones. We allocate land and CO4 to investors. And now they are there in Ekiti, have value for their money. Federal government should look at that. And however, as they are running it, civil servants don't have any business in their board. Government can just have some percentages, but it should be run exclusively by the civil servant, and you begin to see the impact. Thank you once again.
Thank you so very much for that. Really, the government's role is to provide an enabling environment, but that role, that strategic partnership, there must be an handshake between the private and the public sector. Thank you very much for that. So let me come now to Mr. Akintunde, and that is talking about funding. You know, as we rightly said, that every sector is also conversing, you know, for an increase in their own budgetary allocation. And the fact remains that in as much as we want to push this, we must look at alternative means, innovative financing, which you rightly alluded to. So from your perspective, and again, looking at the Agricultural Development Fund as well, you know, which is designed to address subsectoral funding gaps, research and training institutions, amongst many other things. How do you think we can bridge this funding gap, one? And then in addition to that, what are those innovative financing that we can explore to boost the agri sector? Thank you. Hello, Mr. Akintunde, did you hear me? Hello, Mr. Akintunde, can you hear me?
It's the fact that funding is not the main issue. Hello? Yes,
Okay, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Okay, I think my internet is a bit unstable. Okay, okay.
Okay, please go ahead. Okay, I think we'll come back right to him. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so as I was saying, right, but so much more out of youth. We said we need to private public enterprises in promoting Nigeria. We understand the importance of government indeed, and their role should be more streamlined, putting in the appropriate policies in place to promote private businesses to be able to run agriculture seamlessly in the country. But on the back of that, we have private capital driving the management and operations of the business, then it's likely for us to gain more traction in achieving the goal of what we're looking for. And there are success stories all around in the agricultural ecosystem. You've seen some plays in which the government just put in the seed capital and private sector is running it, and it's doing very well. That's on one part. The other part is, I think, there's a need for us to be able to look at, and I'm keen about, you know,
I think we're struggling to hear Mr. Akintunde. Hello, Mr. Akintunde, we're struggling to hear you. I'm not, your network is not so clear. We can hear you clearly. All right, so maybe what we can do is, while we are waiting for you to probably look at your network, let me come now to Mr. Olowoye.
I'm not hearing you, please. I'm not hearing you. There's something.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I think I pressed the mute by mistake. Apologies about that. All right, so coming to your own sector now, of course, your own responsibility is more like providing a risk management solution, right? So again, if we look at this budgetary allocation to the agri sector, and of course, the attendant issues confronting that sector, issues such as the weather, for example. Now, we got information from NIMET, a warning that the rain for this year, the prediction for this year is that the rain will come out earlier and then it will even be, we should expect more possible flooding, right? This year, 2023. So from your own perspective, how do you intend to cushion this effect of risk, you know, associated with the agricultural activities in Nigeria? Because again, it's a major issue for the farmers.
Thank you very much. The Nigerian Agricultural and General Corporation, like I said, was established in 1987. We started operation in 1988. And since then to date, we have, up to the past 2 years, we have single-handedly managed the agricultural risks in the sector in Nigeria. What we have products, like we said, to target these issues. Even before climate change issues, we have been managing climate risk for years, including flood, drought, pest diseases, and so on. And we have been ensuring that the mandate of these corporation has been 2019, we paid about 877 million naira to farmers, majorly on the flood. And in 2020, another 874 million naira to them. So we have been doing this. And more importantly, recently, we looked at issue of the climate change impact on farmers and others. And we have decided to extend our crop policy to cover this damage by cattle and other domestic animals, to ensure that we try to wade in into all the efforts of the federal government to arrest these unnecessary incessant clashes between farmers. Now, as to the impact of budget on our activities, well, we are feeling the impacts too. For example, two key issues, two key attributes of NAIC is that, one, NAIC is mandated by the NAIC Act Cap N89, laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to subsidize premium paid by farmers by 50%. So the farmer will pay 50% on the premium or premium on their products on selected food crops and some selected livestock. So the federal government is supposed to reimburse the corporation to the tune of 37.5%, while the state government, where the state where the project is located, we reimburse NAIC with 0.5%. The federal government has been trying, has been living up to expectation, but the same cannot be said of the state government that are not been living up to expectation at all. Every effort to make them to come to terms with their responsibilities at the National Council on Agriculture and Rural Development. That is the highest policy making body in Nigeria on agriculture. Every effort to make them to come to terms has failed. So, like I said earlier, it is not only about budgeting, but target-based budgeting. For example, now, farmer paid 50%, so who will pay us the 50% if the federal government and the state government refuse to pay? So it shows to you that the amount of money budgeted for farmer subsidy with NAIC goes to the farmer because he doesn't have to pay 100%, he only pays 50%. So, and another issue is that much of the policy on intervention, for example, agricultural policy on alcohol borrowers program, could have been effectively monitored by NAIC. We are not monitored by NAIC because the act says it must be under the purview of NAIC for insurance. But the wisdom of CBN made them to take it away and took it to private underwriters who are only looking for their own profit without looking at the undercurrent of the national agricultural production, which NAIC will not have done. So there are a lot of things and that is why we keep on budgeting money for agriculture and we can't see the result of it. But now, finally, let me just say something. What we could do, in addition to requesting for federal government to increase budget, there are some specific issues that we have to actually tackle in the Nigerian agricultural sector. And I'm happy the Honorable Minister, the current Minister, have been saying that the debt of extension service providers, the debt must be addressed. That is why some of our agricultural products have been rejected at international community because too much fertilizer, too much chemicals that are not well guided are put there. And the developed countries do not take that because they have a level of system. They have a level that of fertilizer or chemicals that the system will reject. So we need to continue to encourage the minister to ensure that these extension service providers are brought onto the table. And then we have to tell the head of agencies too that it's not about fiefdom, creating fiefdoms. This is my budget. This is that. No, we must get away from creating a fiefdom. We must know that an agency is like a part of a spider web that you add your own value to that spider web. You are a part of that chain. You should not be a weak link in that chain. You should be a strong link so that you link to another chain, who links to another chain to get us to the promised land. Finally, when you look at our agricultural policy, the last one, the green alternative, when you look at the crop production, you find out that, for example, rice, the demand for rice in Nigeria is about 6.3 million tons, whereas the current supply is about 2.3 million. That shows you there is a lot of activities, a lot of profit, a lot of investment needed in that this thing. And that just rice, which is there, which the demand is 4.7 million, and we're having 0.06 million, not even 1 million, with a difference of 4.64 million. So we have a very, if I start reading it from here, they are just there, and anybody can get it at the get a copy of the agricultural policy from 2016 to 2020, the one we just finished. We have entered the NATIP now, which is a new policy, but we are not just listening this data because it's a baseline data that will help agriculture develop further. So we need to ensure that as we are begging government, as we are pleading with them, as we are strategizing to get more money to agricultural sector, everything that I've just mentioned must be in place to ensure that the fund goes to the right direction and not into the gulag it has been going over the years. Thank you. Let me rest my case.
Thank you so very much. Thank you very much for that. So let me now come around quickly to Mrs. Akpabio. We're running out of time, but from your perspective, again, as the Chairperson, Agriculture and Agro-Allied Committee, Lagos Chamber of Commerce of an Industry, investment in the agricultural sector is highly needed. And of course, this investment we're talking about is across the entire value chain. Do we want to talk about the upstream, the midstream, or even the downstream, across the entire value chain? But from your own perspective, how do you think we can boost investments in this particular sector to bridge the funding gaps that will enable Nigeria to derive its full potential of this sector?
Thank you, Olaide. Just a little correction. I'm the former chairperson of the
My apologies.
Agriculture and Agro-Allied Group. So, so many things that we need to do, some of which have been shared with us this morning by all the panel speakers. But besides what has been said, I have developed also a template to share. For us, a public-private sector engagement is a sine qua non. It has to happen. Otherwise, the level of development will continue to, to dip further, because it's the private sector that will make the pool. Look at what happened in the Ekiti, like Prince Adetoyi has just shared with us. The government conceived, the idea, provided a certain level of support that the private sector now reached out to. So the land was made available, clearing was made available, and it was easy for the private sector to pick it up from there. We are very conversant with the fact that the government, both at the federal and state levels, really don't have the deep pockets to develop agriculture. And that is why they have to partner with the private sector very, very strongly. And one of the things that the private sector, just like every investor will expect, is that let us have the proper infrastructure. Let's have the legal infrastructure. And when you're putting together, when we're talking about legal infrastructure, let's start with the policies. The policies are there, but what was the action plan? Those are some of the things that you will find many countries having stakeholder engagements. It is that engagement that lets everybody pick and everybody understands, where the government is going and what they need to do. And I'm not very strong on the federal government. I think the federal government needs to have their own work cut out for them. Agriculture is on the concurrent list, meaning that the states can legislate on it. We need to have stronger involvement of the states in the development of agriculture. The investors will want to join with them. Let the federal government have its own work, probably providing regulation at the federal level, talking of regulatory bodies, talking about standards, talking about the national policy, talking about exports, and begin to work on those areas. And then let the states also have their own policies. We have so many of those agencies that Mrs. Umar mentioned earlier that have already developed research documents that the states can use. A very familiar one is the OLOB, one local government, one product that was produced by SMIDAN. That document is so rich, shows you for the 774 local governments in Nigeria, gives you the agricultural activity of their comparative advantage. I'm expecting that every state governor will have, every state government will have that document in the State House. That is the fundamental document that will be given, to the Commissioner for Agriculture after the oath has been taken, oath of office has been taken. And then that commissioner can really have the targets that they need, to deliver, and many other ones. And we need to be very serious with ourselves. So such infrastructure, such legal policy documents are, and in the point of implementation, we do not see objectives. We cannot even see the traction that is expected, and we cannot even see, the M&E is not even there. So from what Mr. Oloye said, a lot of emotion but no movement. We need to stop that if we want the private investors, to come in and pick up from where the government has left off. The physical infrastructure, we can talk over and over and over. roads are bad, rails are non-existent, air freighting, you know, we have a lot of cargo airports. I don't even know what they are doing. You know, we are just commissioning airports here and there, cargo airports, cargo airport. Okay, where is the cargo? We need to take ourselves seriously. So let's begin to think around, you know, all those initiatives, all those schemes that we are busy, you know, publicizing and all of that. I want to also look at insecurity. There is a lot of insecurity. All of these that we've shared, the experiences of the producers, they are heartbreaking, really heartbreaking. There's a lot that the government is not providing. These farmers go ahead from their little resources they provide, and what happens? Insecurity that they rely on the government, the constitution puts it on the government to provide, is lacking. End of the day, they are back to not even square one, square zero. So when we do 10 steps forward, 11 steps backwards, I don't think we are going anywhere. There's a lot that we need to do. We understand that government cannot fund everything. We do understand that. But the credit, remember, Mrs. Umar talked about the credit. We really need to have that credit. We need to have grants. She's talked about IFAD, FAO, World Bank. I think they need to really look at what they are financing. If after all these years,
Hello, Mrs. Akpabio.
Not done their M&E to see that something is wrong. Something is wrong somewhere. I'm hearing you, Olaide.
Yes, we couldn't hear you at some point, but it's all right now.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. So let's all have that synergy. That synergy will help us to be able to work towards the same goal. We can bring out our own resources. We have a lot of resources from the investor's perspective. We have a lot of resources that we can bring to the table. Government should just ensure that they do that which they are expected to do, which is providing the enabling environment, and the opportunities, amazing opportunities in this sector will certainly flourish. Thank you very much, Olaide.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. Again, I think synergy is key across all parties, all stakeholders involved. So just before we go on now to my final question, I'd like to ask the delegates and participants, if you have questions, if you have comments, kindly drop them in the Q&A box there. We'll be taking your questions and your comments now. So just drop the questions either in the chat box or the Q&A box. So thank you very much. So while we're waiting for that to come in, I just have one final question for all the panelists, and that is talking about, yes, oh, so sorry. I don't know, my microphone keep muting. I'm just going to ask from each one of you, what is that one thing, okay, let me repeat again, that a lot of things has been said on this platform today, several initiatives of what we expect to see from the government as well. But with the new and incoming administration, yes, they can't achieve everything. In order of priority, I would say just one thing from your own end. What is it that you would want this government to focus on in terms of priority? Just one thing. So let me start with, I'll start with Mr. Just a second. Oh, okay, I haven't got him yet. All right, let me start with Mr. Olaniyan.
Thank you. The one thing I would want in every agency of government focus on their primary mandate, not to dabble into other people's mandate, and not to trample on the establishing or the law that establish other sister organizations. Focus, ensure, compel them to focus on their primary mandate so that they can add their own value to the system, and everybody will be the better for it. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that. So I will now come around to Dr. Adetoyi. So while you're going to add that to that, I just want to put a little twist to it, and that is talking about talking about the global food crisis, again, we must also look at this, that for this incoming government, what would they do, especially building resilience, into the shocks of food crisis? So what is that one thing that you would want them to give the attention to?
Thank you, Olaide. Wow, it's a very, very 1 billion question. However, I'm very happy for the question. I will want the incoming government to please focus on specific crops where we can take it through the entire value chain, from planting, and of course, planting entails so many things. Before you can plant, you see farm preparation, you see use of mechanization will be there, good seedlings, good seed, and of course, growing it, making what is necessary available, like all the input, fertilizer. I don't even want to talk of that. It's not even available because you see farmer in Ekiti going to just to go and look for fertilizer. So they should prioritize some crops, specifically where we have comparative advantages. For example, Nigeria is the highest producer of yam, 59 million metric tons. Nigeria is the highest producer of, cassava is 59 million metric tons. Yam, 34 million metric tons. The same thing with potato. What can government do on this? Sesame seed is there. Cocoa is there. These are where we can have high value. Garlic is there and co. So apart from government declaring state of emergency and ensuring each of the geopolitical zone should cooperate together. We have maybe Northwest Governors Forum, this one Governors Forum. Let them now have a Greek forum in all the geopolitical zone where they will look at specific crop. So let me now be too narrow. To my Southwest people, we don't have any business to come to Abuja to come and wait for money. Cocoa is there. Rice is there. Oil palm is there. Plantain and banana is there. Poultry is there. Maize is there. I cannot be quantify the quantity required and what the country are producing currently. That is why you see most of investors and farmers rushing to federal government. Please allow maize to come in, allow this one to come in, allow that to come in. We don't need it. We should be exporting. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much for that. So let me now come around to Mrs. Akpabio. So from your own end, again, put in perspective also the issue of the global grain and of course energy prices that have also surged, and I'm sure you're also aware of the heightened prices of wheat, particularly. But again, in all that we have said today, what's that one thing from your own point of view that this incoming administration should give attention to?
I would want us to look inwards. You see all those Ukraine war, wheat prices and all of that. If we are able to work on our comparative advantage activities, whether crop or livestock, some of which Prince Adetoyi has provided, we will not be, we won't have that negative impact, that we're having. We depend too much on imported food. That's why we are where we are. We now need to come inwards. I would advise the government, let's drop some of that politics. Politics is good, but nationalism is better. Our sovereignty is more important, than the negative politics that we are playing. I was also towing the line of Prince Adetoyi that the commissioners for agriculture, geopolitical zone by geopolitical zone, should have regular interactions so that they can provide useful advice to their state governments and we can overhaul the agricultural system that we are working with right now, which is not working. End of the day, you will discover that there will be vibrancy, there will be a lot of activity nationwide, and we will not be so helpless in the face of some of these external activities that may affect us. Let's grow our economy. Let's be serious about agriculture, and agriculture will take us out of any economic woes. I tell you, Olaide.
Thank you very much. Thank you absolutely for that. Again, we would also push that, because at the end of this, we would also have a paper that would also go out, that would iterate all we have discussed here today. So unfortunately, I haven't got Mr. Akintunde. I think he had network problem. And of course, Mrs. Umar also had to leave because she had to join a flight. But very quickly, we'll go on to the questions that I have here. And please, panelists, anyone can answer. So the first question I have here is from Mr. Oyeniro, and that is to say, what plans or structures do we have in place or intend to have to integrate renewable energy solutions in the agricultural value chain in terms of lighting, either on the farm or the farm lodges, or in terms of crop production, such as irrigation, or to power and enhance communication across the farmlands? And that's considering that the farmlands are situated, off grid. So anybody can answer.
Well, thank you. The National Agricultural Transformation and Innovation Plan has a lot of issues on renewable energy, and I will advise the questioner to check with the website of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development to get that document, and I believe you will get correct answers to his question there. And from there, you can even help to enrich that native document by sending some of the suggestions to the website communication. The email is the website www.fmard.gov.ng. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. All right, so going on to the next question, because our time is fast spent, and that is to say, how is funding channeled from ministry to reach the farmer at low cost?
I think, let me go on with this. It is very, very important. Federal government, they have very good policies. Is implementation that is a bit faulty. Well, it's good. Let's take rice, for example. Money being budgeted maybe under anchor borrower. There should be a direct impact, because, for example, money is coming to Ekiti State for rice farmers. It should go directly to that farmers. But what you see is that some of the input, everything will be bought somewhere in Kaduna, somewhere in Jos. And you want me to come and carry input from Jos to Ekiti? No, it's very wrong. They should look at this. The program is good, but the implementation is very wrong. You should look at a particular environment. Farmer around Kaduna, farmer around Kano should have access to input around that particular area. And I believe if, let me take cashew and cocoa, for example. I'm not going to mention the MDA. I am to come and carry it in Lokoja. I'm in Ekiti. Why can't I have my nursery plant? We have a lot of good people that can make a nursery plant for cocoa, for cashew and co. You want to come with intervention in cashew? You ask me to come to Lokoja to come and carry cashew or cocoa? It doesn't work. We have to look at it. The money should go directly to those people that benefit. And if it goes through an association, it has to be vetted very well. And of course, there must be checks and balances. Some of it goes to the end of the association. You see all the executive filtering it out without apology, because I've seen the practical of it, and I'm not going to mention name. So money coming from CBN, if it's for that state, the state governor should constitute head people, successful people in the area of agriculture that has names, that has integrity, that will implement this. It should not be seen as a national cake. That is why you see World Bank report on anchor borrower, how much a farmer has paid back. So when a farmer, a typical farmer that was given maybe an agrochemical that's supposed not to be more than 2,000 naira in Ekiti, is being given agrochemical for 5,000. How do you want to get your money back when you can get this thing at 2,000 in Ekiti? So those are the things we should look at. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much for that. We have a lot of questions, but I may not be taking all of them, but I can assure you that if you have any questions there and we're unable to take them, we would send the response to you. So you can just leave us with your email address and then we'll send that to you. But still on questions, I still have 3 more questions here. And first is talking about in what ways can we reduce the cost of production of agricultural businesses? The cost of production has increased drastically, and that's very correct. And has even forced many farmers out of businesses. For example, the poultry industry has suffered drastic increased cost of production. So what can be done to reduce that cost of production?
Thank you once again. The cost of funding first, we should look at the cost of funding. I approached a deposit money bank. It's telling me to come and take loan at 30%. What will be the return on investment? Let's take poultry, for example, which are really very big business in the Southwest. The cost of maize, moving maize from the northern part to the Southwest. Even when we plant some maize in the Southwest, there's no real mechanization. So when you are preaching to farmer for mechanization, where are the tractors? Where are the DA, D7 of this world to prepare the land for them? So they don't have access. Even the land they are going to make this poultry, they will buy it. Maybe you see in some area, a plot of land will be 1.5 million. So how we farmer break even? Somebody said it's going out. They will say it's a fowl going through a cesarean operation that they will be buying a crate of egg at 2,000 or 3,000. Chicken does not go through cesarean operation. By the time you factor in the cost of land, the cost of energy, the cost of transportation, even the ingredient, maize, you will use 600 kilograms, which is 60% in a feed first. Look at the protein, the soya beans. Look at what it takes farmer in Zamfara or Kaduna to produce a kilogram of maize. So we have to look at all this holistically from the farming production, from this subsistence. And you have not even factored in cost of insecurity, conflict, then even multiple taxation. You get to the Jeba Bridge, your maize cross to Kwara side, you see a lot of people putting a nail on the road and ready to even burn the raw material. The farmer will be waiting at Ibadan or at Abeokuta. The same thing happened to other geopolitical zones too. So the cost of production will continue to increase if government does not come in. Commercial agriculture credit scheme that government introduced before was very okay, where farmer we take loan a single interest rate. I'm not saying it, even if you have money in Lekki, or you have house in Lekki or Banana Island, you cannot go to Money Deposit Bank, put all your collateral and said you want to do agriculture. Once the interest rate is low, is less than 9%, you cannot break even. Even the back of industry, they will build a factory for you, they will buy the equipment and co. For agriculture to have a food holding in Nigeria and for the cost to drive down, we must look at what goes in, because it is what goes in that will go out at the end of the day. Whether you are producing maize, whether you are producing sorghum or soya or yam, or you want to process, most of these machinery are not available to Nigeria. So the new incoming government must make it attractive now for some of these tractor producing company to come to Nigeria, give them incentive and co. Through this public-private partnership, I believe they can still do it. So the input that any farmer use, whether you are poultry crop and the funding of it is equivalent to increase in prices of food in the market. And of course, you have not even factored in the conflict, the insecurity. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so very much, Dr. Adetoyi. Thank you. So I'll take just one more question. And that is to say, what should government do to solve the current problem of lack of extension workers to guide our farmers to enhance the crop for export initiative? I'd like Mrs. Akpabio to take that. What should government do to solve the current problem of lack of extension workers to guide our farmers enhance the crops for export initiative?
Thank you very much, Olaide. Let me cast our mind back to the National Policy on Agriculture 2016 to 2020. It spelled out so clearly the involvement of the private sector in the extension services provision, meaning that government alone cannot cover that effectively. So it was to be a business opportunity for the private sector. What do we need to do now is for the private sector to come in, pick up those young, vibrant, curious, enthusiastic young people graduating from University of Agriculture, and prep them and deploy them. Because right now, since we want to see agriculture as a business and not as a social service, we have to take essential services also to that level, because that is what they will professionalize them. Government can provide the enabling environment for them to be able to flourish, provide as career opportunities in the civil service, but I am banking on the private sector to be able to provide that. And it boils down to what Mr. Oluwayeye and Prince Adetoyi have said earlier. For me, we have to take agriculture to the state and local government level. That's where the players are. And the state government and the local government, they have to take those kind of activities seriously. Where are the officers that are going to attend, to the farmers in their different locations? You need to have them in the civil service, you need to train them, and you need to provide the support that they require to interface with the farmers in the locations or the providers of the services for the farmers. Let me tell you one of the experiences I have had at extension services level provided by the public service. Ordinary stock availability. It's saddening that what the public service will provide for you is very poor quality seeds. So when you have that coming from the government, it's heartbreaking. So let's leave it, maybe because government is already having that attitude of we are helping. Let's not help anybody here. Let the private sector take this as an opportunity. As a farmer, I go to that private sector firm that I can get essential services from. I know what to get, whether it's a product or a service. I get the results in my farm business and I'm good to go. We need to get to that level. Otherwise, we are not going to outgrow the situation that we are right now. Government should provide enabling environments. Essential services should be seen as a business for the private sector from now on. Thank you very much, Olaide.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much, everyone. So just to summarize, obviously, that the conversations today have underscored, all those strategic issues that are confronting the sector and the need, in fact, urgent need, as Mr. Adetoyi said, it's called the state for emergency, the need to adequately fund that sector. And every agency of government should also focus on their primary mandates. We should also focus on specific crops across the value chain, particularly where we have comparative advantage across the various regions, and there must be regular interactions. And government should continue to create an enabling environment. That is the responsibility of the government. And of course, the most important is that there also must be the synergy, the handshake between the government and the private sector. There must be an holistic approach through concerted initiatives on the entire food system, not just on the policy, but even the political will, as we rightly heard about even the minister that heads that sector, also to ensure that we integrate all stakeholders, including the private sector. Overall, partnership and collaboration really by all sector stakeholders is really essential, and that is what is key to actualizing the potential of the agricultural sector. So my very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say a super huge thank you to all my esteemed panelists. You made my job easy, and of course, you did absolutely amazing. Thank you so very much for your time. So I'd like to invite our DG, Mr. Dele Alimi, M.IoD, for his vote of thanks. Thank you very much. Mr. Alimi, I think if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Okay, I'm here now. Apologies. I was muted. My apologies. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, distinguished participants. It's been a very rewarding experience for us all. I really wish we could talk more about this. For someone like me who had kind of ventured into agriculture, I'm always very interested in this. I call myself a pocket farmer because I find farming very pleasurable. But in venturing into it, I found out that without developing that sector, Nigeria cannot sustain itself in terms of food security. We just have to do so much to make that place work. And that link between the various policies that have been put in place by government and how the farmers, how to get to the farmer, it's critical that we must create that link. Very, very critical. I've seen quite a lot of the question, and I can see those questions coming up. How do farmers get this? How do farmers get that? I think that link is critical. But my job here is not that. What my job is here is to say thank you to everyone that has made this possible. And I will first want to thank, of course, our panelists. On behalf of the Institute, I want to thank Mr. Akpabio today. Thank you very much for heeding our call and for being a good participant here today. Prince Dr. Bode Adetoyi, we thank you very much for coming. And Mrs. Aisha Umar, though she has left now, but we can't but say a big thank you to her for taking time to join us at this webinar. Mrs. Akpabio, thank you very much, madam. We appreciate you for the question we read. And of course, Mr. Jerome Olowoyeye, thank you for ably representing Mrs. Joseph. Please extend our appreciation to her. You've done very well here today, and we do appreciate it.
Mr. Alimi, I think we lost you again. We can't hear you. Now, the issue of technology is still ongoing across, but Mr. Alimi, we lost you. We can't hear you. I think he has a network issue.
Let me just come in and say that we are quite grateful on behalf of the Governing Council and the Executive Committee of the Institute of Directors. This has been a wonderful event, and all the participants have given good accounts of themselves, and the issues at stake are now very clear, that beyond funding, we are looking at other issues in terms of collaboration, in terms of not working in silos, in terms of getting, identifying comparative advantages across our different zones and so on, in terms of actually seeing how these responsibilities can be done at state levels, local government areas, and the private public sector partnership. The DG is back. And so I would like to say thank you very much for your time, and it's been worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. At the most crucial time, internet fails you, and I really apologize. I really apologize to everyone. And I think, I don't know when was the last time you had me, but I was thanking the moderator. I've thanked all the panelists, and I want to thank the chairman of the Agric Group. I want to thank her for tenacity. I want to thank her for the support she's given the Institute, she and her committee. They've done very well for this very, very important sector of the Nigerian economy. I say very big thank you. And of course, to Madam President, I want to say thank you for always being there to provide the guidance that is needed at all times. And I want to especially thank all the participants. I want to thank them for making themselves available for this event and for participating actively. Madam President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I wish us a wonderful day, and I wish us also a very good business day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for inviting us. God bless you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All the best.